Well folks, South Korea's been making headlines, and not for their catchy K-pop this time. It's a full-blown political drama, starring their now former president, Yoon Yeol. You see, Yoon's presidency took a nosedive faster than a Samsung phone dropped in a bowl of kimchi. He was impeached by Parliament back in December, and just this past Friday, April 4th, 2025, the Constitutional Court gave him the official boot. Gone. Out of there. So how did this once popular leader go from topping the charts to getting totally tuned out? Well, buckle up, because it's a wild ride. Yoon, a former prosecutor with a bit of a reputation for, let's say, going hard, won the presidency in 2022. He was seen as a tough-on-crime, no-nonsense kind of guy. Think of him as the Korean Clint Eastwood if Eastwood had a penchant for impromptu karaoke sessions, more on that later. But his honeymoon period was shorter than a North Korean missile test. He quickly found himself butting heads with the opposition, who, as luck would have it, hold a majority in parliament. They blocked his policies, impeached some of his cabinet members, and generally made his life a living hell. Now you might think that a president facing this kind of opposition would try to, I don't know, find some common ground, maybe reach across the aisle, but Yoon, he's not exactly known for his compromising spirit. So what did he do? Well, he pulled a move straight out of the dictator's playbook. He declared martial law. That's right folks, martial law, in December of 2024, citing vague threats from anti-state forces and a healthy dose of political frustration. Yoon went full authoritarian. He sent troops to parliament, literally, to remove lawmakers who were trying to block his decree. It was like something out of a bad action movie, only with less convincing fight choreography and more awkward silences. Now, you might be thinking martial law in South Korea? Isn't that, a democracy? And you'd be right to be confused. See, South Korea has a bit of a complicated history with authoritarianism. They've only been a proper democracy for a few decades, and the ghosts of military dictatorships past still linger in the background. So, when Yoon pulled this stunt, it sent shockwaves through the country. Even some of his own supporters were like, dude, not cool. The martial law decree itself lasted only 6 hours before Parliament managed to overturn it. 6 hours of pure political chaos. But those 6 hours were enough to do some serious damage. They exposed the fragility of South Korea's democracy and left the country deeply divided. On one side you had Yoon's supporters, mostly conservatives who felt he was justified in taking drastic measures to deal with a supposedly obstructive opposition. They argued that the country was on the brink of chaos and that Yoon was the only one strong enough to restore order. On the other side, you had everyone else. Liberals, moderates, even some conservatives who thought Yoon had gone too far. They saw his actions as a blatant power grab, a dangerous step towards authoritarianism. They took to the streets in protest, demanding his resignation. And, spoiler alert, they eventually got their wish. The impeachment itself was a foregone conclusion. The opposition had the numbers in parliament, and Yoon's martial law stunt had pretty much guaranteed their support. But the real question was whether the Constitutional Court would uphold the impeachment. This is South Korea's highest court, the final arbiter of all things legal and constitutional. And they don't mess around. The court's deliberations lasted for months. They heard arguments from both sides, reviewed mountains of evidence, and generally took their sweet time. But in the end, they reached a unanimous decision. Yoon had to go. Their reasoning was pretty straightforward. They said that Yoon's declaration of martial law was a clear violation of the Constitution. He hadn't followed the proper procedures, he hadn't demonstrated a genuine national emergency, and he'd basically just used the military to try and bully the opposition into submission. Not exactly the hallmarks of a democratic leader. The court also found that Yoon had violated the rights of lawmakers by sending troops to remove them from parliament. And just for good measure, they threw in a line about how he'd betrayed the public's trust. Ouch. Section 4. Echoes of the Past. Public and Political Reactions. The court's decision was met with mixed reactions in South Korea. Yoon's supporters were, understandably, not happy. They accused the court of being biased against him, of being in cahoots with the opposition, of basically being a bunch of meanies who just wanted to see him fall. Some even went so far as to call for protests and demonstrations, though these were largely sparsely attended. It seems even the angriest pro-Yoon folks weren't quite up for another round of political turmoil. On the other hand, Yoon's opponents, which at this point was a pretty sizable chunk of the population, were overjoyed. They celebrated in the streets, popped open some soju, that's Korean rice wine for the uninitiated, and generally breathed a collective sigh of relief. Democracy, it seemed, was safe for another day. The political fallout was swift and brutal. Yoon's own party, the Conservative People Power Party, was thrown into disarray. They'd staked their reputation on him, and now he was gone, leaving them to pick up the pieces. They quickly issued a statement accepting the court's decision and promising to work with the opposition during the transition period. Whether they actually meant that, well, that's a different story. Section 5. Looking ahead, South Korea's uncertain future. So what does the future hold for South Korea? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The country is now facing a snap presidential election, which has to be held within 60 days. And while there are plenty of potential candidates waiting in the wings, none of them are particularly inspiring. The frontrunner is Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the opposition Democratic Party. He narrowly lost to Yoon in the 2022 election, and he's been waiting for his chance at a rematch ever since. Lee is a charismatic figure, but he's also a bit of a loose cannon. He's known for his fiery rhetoric and his populist policies, which tend to make economists break out in hives. But Lee's got bigger problems than just his economic policies. Remember those allegations of a plot to reinstate Yoon? Yeah, well, they're swirling around like bad bibimbap, and they're starting to stick to Lee. The ruling party is now accusing him of being involved in the plot, of trying to undermine the Constitutional Court, and of basically being a threat to national security. Lee, of course, denies everything, but the damage might already be done. And then there's the whole international situation. South Korea is a key US ally in a region that's becoming increasingly volatile. North Korea is still lobbing missiles into the sea, China is flexing its muscles, and Russia, well, let's not even go there. South Korea needs a strong, stable leader now more than ever. And right now, it's not clear who that leader will be. So there you have it, folks. The South Korean political drama, complete with constitutional crises, military shenanigans, and enough plot twists to make your head spin. What happens next? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be interesting.